I will set this house on fire and your children are going to die. Who could it be?
The Sodder children are at the heart of one of the most chilling mysteries in American history, a case that still echoes through true crime lore and small-town legend. On Christmas Eve, 1945, a fire consumed the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and 5 of George and Jennie Sodder's 10 children were never seen again. Despite death certificates, a declared accident, and official closure, the mystery only deepened as strange clues and reported sightings emerged over the decades. Now, nearly 80 years later, a new clue could finally change everything. The night that changed everything. In the early hours of Christmas morning, 1945, Jennie Sodder received a strange phone call. A woman's voice asked for someone unfamiliar, followed by laughter and clinking glasses in the background. After Jennie hung up, she noticed something was off. The curtains were open, the lights were on, and the door was unlocked. Chores she had specifically asked her children to take care of before bed. Annoyed, she turned everything off and went back to sleep. Just an hour later, smoke began to fill the house, jolting Jennie and her husband George awake to a nightmare in progress. The fire spread rapidly, and George, Jennie, and 4 of their children managed to escape. But Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie Jr., and Betty, aged 5 through 14, never came out. George made desperate attempts to rescue them, trying everything from smashing windows to retrieving a ladder and even starting his coal trucks to reach the second floor, but every option failed. The ladder, usually propped against the house, had vanished. The coal trucks, working just fine the day before, suddenly wouldn't start. Every move was thwarted as the fire consumed the home. Calls for help also meant delay. Their phone line had gone dead. A neighbor's attempt to call the fire department was unsuccessful, and it took hours for a truck to arrive. By the time the volunteer firefighters made it to the scene around 8 a.m., the house was reduced to rubble. In the immediate aftermath, authorities believe the children had perished in the fire. Yet a search through the ash and debris turned up no human remains, not a single bone or body fragment to account for 5 children. Authorities initially concluded the blaze was caused by faulty wiring, and 5 death certificates were issued, but the Sodders quickly grew suspicious. The home's wiring had recently passed inspection. The absence of any remains deeply disturbed Jennie, who conducted her own burn tests on animal bones and found they never fully disintegrated. Her growing skepticism was matched by George, who began to suspect foul play. What if the children hadn't died in the fire at all? What if they'd been kidnapped and the blaze was just a distraction? The fire that left no traces. While the official narrative stated that the children were cremated in the blaze, the evidence failed to align with that explanation. Fire Chief F.J. Morris claimed the inferno was hot enough to destroy all remains, yet common sense and science suggested otherwise. In 1947, the Sodders commissioned a report from an Ohio crematorium which declared that even under extreme conditions, bones would still remain after cremation. This cast serious doubts on the idea that 5 entire bodies could disappear without a trace. Even more perplexing was what was found. In 1949, the Sodders initiated another excavation at the fire site, bringing in D.C. pathologist Oscar B. Hunter. This careful search unearthed several small objects, damaged coins, a partly burned dictionary, and a few vertebrae. The Smithsonian concluded the bones belonged to a person aged 16 or 17, older than the Sodder children. Crucially, these bones showed no evidence of fire damage and were likely introduced through the soil used to fill in the site. The search failed to turn up any remains that matched the missing children. Stranger still, Fire Chief Morris had allegedly hidden a human organ in the ashes in an attempt to satisfy the family. When the organ was later recovered, it turned out to be a beef liver that had never been exposed to flames. Morris reportedly planted it, hoping it would persuade the grieving parents to move on. Instead, it further fueled their suspicion that something more sinister had taken place that night. The Sodders were relentless in seeking the truth. They questioned everything: the delay in fire response, the faulty wiring claim, even statements from local officials. The man who had threatened George for his anti-Mussolini views was discovered to have served on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire accidental. Sightings and strange encounters.
But not everyone was a fan of the Sodders. The patriarch George was an outspoken critic of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini throughout the war. Well, I like George now. And this rubbed some in the community the wrong way. Could the fire have been an act of comeuppance from some Mussolini loyalists in the town? Judging by the insurance broker's threat, it sure seems so.
As years passed, stories began to surface of people seeing children matching the Sodders' descriptions. A hotel worker in Charleston reported seeing 4 of the children with 2 men and 2 women of Italian descent on the night of the fire. She noted that one of the men appeared hostile and spoke rapidly in Italian when she tried to talk to the kids, creating a sudden chill in the air. The next morning, the entire group vanished without a trace. Another woman running a roadside diner recalled serving breakfast to a group of children, matching the Sodder siblings' appearances on the morning after the fire. She remembered the vehicle had Florida plates, raising further questions about how quickly and how far the children could have been moved. These reports fueled a wave of speculation. Were the children taken as part of a larger plan? Was it revenge for George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini, or something even darker? The Sodders hired private investigator C.C. Tinsley to follow up on leads. He uncovered disturbing details, including the fact that the man who had threatened George about Mussolini had also once worked for him and was a co-signer on the family's inflated insurance policy. Tinsley even looked into the report that Morris had hidden remains in a box, which, as mentioned, turned out to be staged. Still, none of these revelations brought the Sodders any closer to finding their children. A billboard and a nation's obsession. In 1952, the Sodders had taken their campaign to the public. Along Route 16, near their former home, they erected a massive billboard bearing the faces of their 5 missing children. And it said $5,000 reward for any information. Over time, the amount was raised to $10,000. The haunting message on the sign asked plainly, what was their fate? Kidnapped, murdered, or are they still alive? For nearly 4 decades, that billboard stood as a constant reminder of the mystery. It attracted national attention. Journalists, amateur sleuths, and curious travelers all speculated about the case. New clues and potential sightings came from all corners of the country. A woman in St. Louis claimed Martha was living in a convent. Another tip from Texas involved a barroom conversation about a fire in West Virginia. In Florida, someone insisted the children were staying with one of Jennie's distant relatives. But despite the abundance of leads, no proof ever emerged. In the late 1960s, Jennie received an envelope postmarked from Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a man in his 20s bearing a strong resemblance to Louis Sodder. On the back of the photo was a handwritten message, Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Despite their excitement and hope, the family never heard from the private investigator they sent to track it down. Fearing the photo might place Louis in danger, they never published the return address. The final clue? A new breakthrough. In the years since, the mystery remained largely dormant, with only occasional speculation by journalists and cold case enthusiasts. But a recent development has renewed interest in what happened to the Sodder children. A genealogy enthusiast working with facial recognition software and historical photo analysis claims to have identified facial matches between Louis Sodder and a man listed in public death records under a different name. The researcher, who remains anonymous, presented the findings to a local historical society and later published them in a genealogy forum. By comparing the 1960s photo of Louis sent to the Sodders with a database of military ID photos from the late 50s, the researcher noted striking similarities in facial structure, eyebrow tilt, and ear shape. These findings, while circumstantial, suggest Louis may have assumed a new identity and served in the military during the Cold War era. More surprisingly, another researcher, working independently, used postal records and archival material to trace the Kentucky address from the 1960s envelope. Although the original house no longer exists, census data suggests a family matching Louis's age range and Italian heritage lived there during that time. DNA testing of one of the descendants is currently underway to establish whether there is a genetic link to the surviving Sodder family. If DNA evidence confirms a match, it could finally crack open a case that's baffled the public for almost 80 years. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think the Sodder children could have survived the fire, or were the sightings and clues simply the product of a grieving family's desperate hope? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.